Welcome to Pro Painted on YouTube. So this is Matthew Lyons. I'm starting a new format for those that may have been listening to the podcast. I am going to be doing an overview of the best army nominations that we see at the events that we attend across the UK. Now this will just be, at least for this episode, my commentary on the armies there. So I've taken a short video of each army that was put up for a display, which was then obviously voted for both by the judges and the players to decide who would walk away with the top 3 painting awards and the judges award at the event. So this was, as I say, Brotherhood 2020, hosted by Chris Tomlin in Cardiff. There are actually 16 nominations up for this event. It was a very high standard, which was great for a competitive event. We're looking at about, I think, 132 players to be precise. So I've also got some comments from some of the armies here. I've spoken to the actual painters, so got some insights I can share. I will try and keep these videos somewhat short, so expect about a 15-minute length. But if you do like what you see, we would love it if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave some comments with what you like the most or what you would like us to talk about in the future. And this may well lead down to us doing some more YouTube content in a different way. So without further ado, we'll start with the first army. So the first army is actually cheating somewhat, as this is my own Flesh Eater Quartz. This was a mostly contrast painted army. The black skin is actually 2 coats of contrast black. I leave the bellies free and do a coat of the Apothecary white. The wings are all airbrushed, mostly zenith, also a base coat, lighter colour from the top, darker colour from an angle. I spent a little bit of extra time on the monsters, some extra highlights on the bone and the exposed flesh there. Obviously a little bit of extra work on the arch region, a bit of dry brushing on the bone on the throne, slightly conversion on that particular Terrorgeist with the Shadespire chap underneath, just to make it look a little bit different. As you can see, I've also got Tamiya red on the exposed flesh on the Crypt Horrors, Crypt Flayers, and the Corpsemare Stampede, one of my favourite models. Not a great shot, but then went really happy with this army, super quick to do. I think it took me about a month or so to get together. Next army up, we have Adam Kunis. This is a heavily converted army. Some fantastic and unique conversions in here. He's actually been a Living City player back since Firestorm, the GW supplement a while ago. You can see the variety of models in there. We've got freehand on the shield, we've got freehand on the banner, we've got a range of some of the older GW models, we've got clump foliage on the branches there. The Dracoths, for example, that's a female rider, which isn't normally the case. Obviously, he's got a converted chariot coming up, where they've got the kind of the older elven steeds on there, which kind of fits the wood elf theme. The dragon's fantastic. I mean, that is obviously a converted Carnosaur with wings, and I actually really like the Hurricanum in the background as well. We'll get a closer shot of that. But obviously, that's the Blood Bowl Death Roller, which I think just works so well. I was really impressed, and that's one of my highlights there. So a really stunning, unique army. Next up, one of our club mates, Tom Hewitt. Really striking Slanesh army. I think he's really pulled this together. Some fantastic reposes on there. You can see that the third Kipper, when we get around to a shot of it, is actually sat on one of the endless spells. It's stood on a hand and it raises it out the ground. Slight reposition on some of the legwork to make these all look unique. Obviously used a lot of the big flowy champion hair on the Demonettes, really makes them stand out. Great shot of the hand there supporting the Kipper, but one hell of a vibrant colour scheme, and I think the subtle basing really works. And obviously right there in the background you can see the terrain feature, which again has got the endless spell in the middle, and that was very popular. I think that worked really, really well. Really did make it stand out. And that vivid orange, that's so nicely done. I love a nice pastel colour, and you can't really go much wrong with a bit of orange in my eyes. Next up, we had Steve Curtis. He was actually saying this is a new approach to army painting. Only took him 10 days to get this all done. Worked through it in batches. All the bone was airbrushed base coats, and then he worked up with successive successive layers of dry brushing, and then finished it off with, we've got some nice jade green here on both the weapons, and he's carried that over for the counterpoint on the Mortek crawler, and then we've also got some OSL as well. It doesn't show up too well in the video, we've got that in the eyes, but one thing I really like is the white he's done on these spirits. Really good. That looks really smooth and nice, and something that I've attempted on my own models. But obviously there's not many conversions here, but the fact that he's managed to produce this kind of army in 10 days, it goes to show both the quality of the models that GW are putting out that allow you to produce these kind of results, and also, you know, what an effective army you can get with such a limited time frame. So then next up we have Sam Saunders. This is a lovely Nurgle army. Quite a lot of airbrush in use here. I think a little bit more obvious than my personal taste. But I think if you look at the fact there's Blight Kings in there, I think he has 2 units of 30 Plague Bearers. I think they all stand out great. There's a nice little kind of understated basing there. But obviously you can see probably use some washes as well to really kind of differentiate the pussy parts and the guts and things like that. Obviously some great airbrush work with the fades there on the Endless Spell. Scrivener looks fantastic, and then I really liked the Geminids. They almost like rotten meatballs in a way, and some good airbrush work there on the Glotkin, really kind of make him stand out. I feel like this army's not 100% finished, or maybe kind of just rushed to the end a little bit. Obviously correct me if I'm wrong there, Sam, but I think it looks great on the table, but I think a little bit more work, you can really push it. Some highlights I think would go down really well here. But yeah, it was a great army to see there from Sam. And then next up we've got another Sam Loving, who's funny enough a teammate now. Sam has heavily converted this army. Every model's unique. It's all kit bashed from multiple Stormcast kits, then given Bretonnian helms, as you can see, and parts as well. No airbrush work here, all hand painted, so that's quartering that he's done. It's going to be really tricky, so, you know, props to him for that. And he's got some great conversions in there. He's turned Gavriel Shoreheart. We'll see him in a minute. He's been turned to a version of the Green Knight, and also the evocators, if you see, they've actually got parts of the Pendulum Endless Spell attached to the weapons to create a trailing effect. And here we are. Here's the Green Knight. That's a great conversion. I think that works really, really well. Obviously, these all convert. They've all got Bretonnian banners on there. A Relictor must be based on half of the Venator, and the Pegasus Knights are actually Morsar Guard, so Deepkin eels. That's what they represent. Nice bit of fluff. Nice bit of backstory there, which you don't often see nowadays. And also, these terrain pieces are his. They're something that he uses to display his army, so it's a great way of presenting that to people. Next up, we've got Ross Howard. Now, this is a very nice Sylvaneth army. Sylvaneth is an army that's you almost end up concept painting it because it's got such limited areas that you can work with and paint. But you can see all these lovely fades and blends and highlights, and the ice effect on the bases with all the colours. And he's not just, you look at the rocks, you know, these stones and rocks, they're not just painted grey. He's got some different tones and shades in there, some great uses of pink highlights, and some great blending there on Alariel. So real fan of this army. Across the board, very striking. I mean, you'll see this army if you're at an event, you know, if you're at an end table 3 tables away, this is the kind of thing that will catch your eye, which is great to see. Now we have Maxime's army. Now personally, this wasn't in my top picks, so I'd be interested. We'll speak to Rob on the podcast of what his main draw to this army was. One of my pet peeves is movement trays, particularly where you can see these are brown. For me personally, I think it really messes with the aesthetics of an army, but I find the bases really interesting. It's this really cool kind of marbly, wet kind of look. So I'm not quite sure how that's been achieved, but I think that's very cool. That really stood out to me with this army in particular. I think this is another army that's maybe been rushed to the finish line a bit. You can see just some quite basic airbrush work on the shrine there, and Marathi could do with a couple of extra details picked out. But overall, I think it's a very nice, very striking army. Red and pink, not my favourite combination, but I think overall it works. So it's great to see a daughter's army up there. So next up is Luke Morton with, to be honest, to Luke, seen photos of this army, I didn't really appreciate it an awful lot until I saw it in the flesh. Obviously, a lot of conversion work's gone here. Really like the swampy bases. It kind of sells the whole undead Deepkin crossover effect. He's done a great idea of swapping out the flight stand to rods, which I recommend everybody with a Deepkin army does. I think he's got these 3D printed nameplates on there. A really good way of adding kind of an extra layer of narrative to your army. But I think all the little conversions, I mean, that's one thing I'd definitely say about if you want to get your armies up for best nominated, taking something unique that's different to everybody else, that's uniquely yours and converted. I think the guy in the background's an assassin there, the Shade from Shadespire, not Shadespire, from Warhammer Quest. And I think this is a great idea. Again, you can see him in the background. The sea creatures, he actually uses them as ether wings, which I think is fantastic. A really, really great idea and a great use for those models. They can actually represent something on the battlefield, which is fantastic. It's just fantastic. Now, we've actually got Josh Richards up here. Now, it's great to see I love the older, and they're not really that old, but the Dark Elf Infantry. I really want to do an army of these guys. And I think Free Cities, where they won't be the most competitive, I think they're definitely very interesting. And obviously, as he has done, he's added Stormcast units. We've got Daughters in there, all kind of painted up in the same colour scheme. We've got Celestial Hurricanum, we've got Black Dragon. So it's a really cool aesthetic, quite different, and I think it really sells the city vibe. And I think his display board is very cool. It's very understated. I think there's a bit of inconsistency with the basing. Personally, I'd like to see that all brought together, and also where they're stood, they are just stood on wood. So if that was textured, if that was painted the same, I think it would really sell it. And obviously the big units of infantry look great. It presents very well, but I think the actual display board is a real highlight. Now, Joel Smith is such an understated painter. His Nurgle, I think, is some of my favourite. Obviously, there's some fantastic Nurgles out there on the scene, but this is quite a muted look, quite a muted army, and it just looks fantastic. I mean, look at the detail on that Rotigus. I'm a big fan of that model and the kind of subtle purple fades. But something that really stood out, I haven't seen this Archeon before, but that basing where it's kind of looks like it's cracked the ground as it comes out, and all the detail and all the highlights he's done on all the wings on Archeon and everything. Brilliant. I think Nurgle gets overlooked a lot because there's such nice detailed models that they dry brush up very well, for example, so they can kind of be looked over, but they can actually be painted beautifully and they just don't stand out enough. Now, this is Ben Mardle. I was lucky enough to play him in an actual game, and I was looking at his Caradron, and they're really nice. What he's cleverly done is he's used shades of purple and brown and black to kind of paint the different detail areas on the things like the Arcanauts. It keeps them very interesting while keeping the tone quite similar, and then with the darker basing, but the lava's not overdone at all. It's sort of, with want of a better word, it's a realistic lava. So I think it stands out really, really well without it looking too cartoony. Ironclad's a massive paint job, bit of freehand there on the side. Brilliant. The two-tone hull works really well. It's really tempting just to paint them silver. And to be fair, seeing the Thunderers like this, I was a huge fan of seeing a unit at 10. And he's done a fantastic job on Brock. I mean, just look, you don't see him very often, but he looks absolutely badass. A good use of a display board, I think it needs the boat at the front to kind of draw the attention and to raise up the infantry a bit more, but it's great, something to work with. So third place we have Jimbo. You've probably seen his army. So James Worth is his full name. I mean, this is a non-metallic metal army. Jimbo was saying he takes 12 to 15 hours per model. He feels his Paladors are actually his best painted unit. The Prime is his favourite conversion in there, which is actually built from a Dante model from Horus Heresy, and he really enjoyed painting that. Obviously, not so much the wings. The non-metallic metal is actually Oscar Lars technique, so I'm going to put a link if we can get some information on that in the notes below. And he specifically went with a very neutral basing colour, which is that grey, so the minis stand out. So I've always been a fan of contrasting bases, so this is a great example of it. I mean, the actual display board itself does a great job of setting the scene. I don't think it's one that particularly displays the army well. I think if you use a display board, you want to build up layers, you want to engage people at eye line, but I think it does a really good job of doing the narrative. Obviously, people agreed, and he took 3rd place in this particular field. Next up, we have Mark Curtis, who is the brother of Steve Curtis, who had the Bone Reapers earlier. So with these guys, obviously these are grot versions of Caradron. So a lot of these Arcanauts are converted with Blood Bowl player parts. Obviously we've got Ether Wings in use here instead of the balloons for all the different Sky Riggers. I don't think he's got any Engine Riggers. I think they're just Sky. Sorry, he hasn't got any Engine Riggers. So I mean that's really cool. I'm actually going to use part of that idea for my own army, which I'm working on. The deck of the ship's all been swapped out with wooden decking, which was the trickiest thing you had to do. The freehand is all on the sails. It's really hard to keep it balanced, to paint all the details on there. And the bases of the infantry, as I said, were kit bashed Blood Bowl models, and the bases themselves were actually, it was wall filler paste, which he kind of sculpted the water effect on. So I think that's it's really striking, and that came in 2nd place. So Steve Smith's army is fantastic, Gloom Spikes. He was saying that the main goal of the army is to try and deliver a concept and then see if he could make it work for the overall theme. So he wanted the forest goblins and spiders. All the details on the bases, especially the bigger kits. He's done lots of conversions. He's tried to showcase the spiders, especially the bigger ones as they come. I mean, it's an ace kit, but it's so much character to it. He wanted to make each one stand out in their own right. Either through the colours or playing around with all the parts in the kit, like the howdah on the spider for the wizard. Lots of additional skulls have been added, repositioned the legs and some of the poses on the Arachnaroks. And one thing is the spider effect, the webbing. Oh, it's so good. And apparently that's the Green Stuff World. It's like a spider web effect. So again, if I can find a link to that, I'll put that below. He's got some glossy black. I mean, that is, for me, one of the best armies on the scene. It's almost like a GW display army, painted to kind of the top standards. Very clean, base coats are great, highlights are spot on, so hard to fault. But I think he's done an amazing job with this army. So that's it from Pro Painter. That's the coverage of the 16 armies there. So please do let me know your thoughts on this kind of format. If you would like the videos to be a bit longer, I think keeping to about 15 minutes or so feels about right. But if you want us to go into more detail, please do let us know. Please comment below so we can keep all the information in one place, and I'll try to reply to every comment we get. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. We would love a subscribe off you, like the video, make sure you turn on the notification bell, and I will be back to do more of the next events that we attend. So we'll make sure we get some great videos of the best army nominations there. So that's the end of this video, and I'm going to end this on one of my favourite Arnold Schwarzenegger lines, which is "See you at the party, Lictor." Goodbye.